Hello there, and welcome to Earth Analyst. Today, I will be speaking about what was Earth like before Pangea. Before Pangea, the Earth was a world unlike anything we know today. A vast expanse of scattered lands and restless oceans, a planet still young, raw, and untamed. The continents floated as separate islands, drifting slowly on the molten currents beneath, each one a cradle for life experimenting in countless forms. Towering mountains rose in jagged bursts, their peaks piercing misty skies, while deep valleys cradled rivers that shimmered like silver ribbons, carving paths across untouched terrain. Volcanoes rumbled and breathed fire, sculpting the land in violent bursts of creation, sending ash clouds that danced across the horizon. Oceans teemed with strange, early life, tiny organisms glowing in the darkness, and gigantic predators patrolled the depths in silence, their shadows stretching across the ocean floor. The air carried a hint of ozone and minerals, thick and heavy, with the scent of raw earth, a reminder of the planet's constant transformation. Forests of towering ferns and primitive trees swayed in prehistoric winds, leaves brushing against one another in a soft, eternal whisper. Gigantic insects crawled along the forest floor, their wings buzzing like ancient machinery, while amphibious creatures slithered between streams and ponds, discovering new ways to live. The sky itself seemed larger, more alive, painted with the golden hue of a sun that shone fiercely but warmly across every landmass. Early reptiles scuttled along rocky cliffs, their scales reflecting sunlight in flashes of emerald and bronze, while the first hints of mammal ancestors burrowed in the shadows, seeking safety and sustenance. Volcanoes, storms, and earthquakes were daily reminders that the Earth was not static, but a living, breathing entity shaping every creature and landscape. Each ocean current carried nutrients and life, connecting distant lands in an invisible web, while whirlpools and massive tides carved intricate patterns into the coastline. In the polar regions, glaciers advanced and retreated, leaving behind sculpted valleys and ice-covered plains that reflected light like a million tiny mirrors. Some continents were barren, rocky wastelands, others lush with vegetation that thrived. Under the changing climate, each ecosystem hosting a delicate balance of predators and prey. Giant ferns and horsetails towered over small reptiles, creating jungles that seemed endless in their density, hiding life in every shadow. In the shallow seas, trilobites crawled in abundance, their armored bodies glinting under the sun, while early fish darted through coral-like formations that were just beginning to take shape. Swamps and marshes stretched for miles, rich with algae and nutrients, feeding the first amphibians as they made tentative journeys onto land. Birds did not yet soar, but the skies were filled with the flutters and movements of insects, some as large as modern birds, tracing loops in the air. Above giant ferns, the temperature varied drastically from region to region, with some lands baking under scorching sun and others shrouded in mist, rain, and chilling winds that tested the resilience of life. Lightning storms were frequent and powerful, igniting small fires in dry plains, helping some plants propagate while wiping out others. A relentless cycle of destruction and renewal. Deep in the oceans, primitive coral structures began forming, shaping habitats that would support countless future species. While tidal waves swept across the shores, reminding every creature of the planet's raw, uncontrollable power. Mountains were jagged and young, rivers carved through them, and the wind carried dust and spores across continents, helping life spread slowly but surely. Life was simple yet fierce, a constant struggle for survival, as the balance of ecosystems was fragile and ever-changing. Predatory fish hunted smaller species in shallow waters, while amphibians and early reptiles competed for space along riverbanks and forest floors. The climate fluctuated, warm in the equatorial regions, colder toward the poles, yet rich in biodiversity wherever conditions allowed. The sky displayed vivid auroras at night, caused by magnetic interactions, bathing the land in an ethereal glow, while nocturnal creatures stirred in search of food. Rain fell unpredictably, sometimes torrential, sometimes gentle, shaping the soil and nourishing life, feeding rivers that cut deep gorges into the land. Oceans expanded and contracted with shifting tectonic plates, creating shallow seas where life could thrive and deeper abysses where the unknown ruled. On some continents, massive deserts stretched endlessly, dotted with rocky formations and hardy plants, while others were cloaked in endless greenery, hosting complex food chains yet to evolve fully. Early insects pollinated primitive plants, enabling the slow spread of vegetation across continents, while the first fungi broke down organic material, returning nutrients to the soil. Tiny crustaceans scuttled across tidal flats, while worms tunneled underground, aerating the soil and setting the stage for future terrestrial life. Mountains reflected sunlight in dazzling displays, while mist and fog rolled through valleys, hiding early predators and their unsuspecting prey. Rivers carved meanders that would last for millions of years, shaping landscapes and connecting ecosystems in a delicate, invisible balance. Swamps were alive with the sounds of buzzing insects and croaking amphibians, while the gentle lapping of waters along riverbanks provided rhythm to a planet constantly in motion. The sun rose and set with unchanging certainty, yet each day brought new challenges, new interactions, new cycles of life and death that shaped evolution. Primitive seashells dotted coastlines, evidence of life thriving in every corner, while early crustaceans adapted to survive both in water and on land. Rocks glistened after rains, reflecting the lushness of forests, the harshness of deserts, and the serenity of plains, a testament to Earth's ever-changing beauty. Winds carried seeds and spores across vast distances, ensuring that even isolated lands were touched by the slow hand of evolution. Volcanic eruptions painted the skies in dramatic shades of red and orange, fertilizing the land with mineral-rich ash and shaping the destiny of life across continents. Glaciers pressed slowly across polar lands, grinding rocks into soil, sculpting valleys, and creating habitats for life in extreme conditions. Rainforests began forming in sheltered areas, creating pockets of biodiversity where early animals thrived in lush canopies and shadowed undergrowth. Insects evolved wings, becoming masters of the air, exploring niches that would later be filled by birds and bats. Shallow seas became nurseries for fish and amphibians, rich with plankton and tiny predators, a dynamic world teeming with life. Every coastline Every riverbank, every mountain slope was a stage for survival, adaptation, and the relentless march of evolution. Early reptiles experimented with different ways to move, feed, and survive, laying the groundwork for future diversity in species. Mammal ancestors burrowed underground, avoiding predators, while amphibians ventured further inland, exploring new territories. Trees and plants, a silent competition for sunlight. Tectonic movements were slow but unstoppable, shaping continents, pushing mountains higher, carving basins for rivers, and creating new habitats. Early clouds formed, carrying moisture and storms across continents, creating rivers, lakes, and wetlands, each vital for sustaining life. Life was young, fragile, yet incredibly resilient, thriving in ways we can only imagine, waiting for the moment when the scattered continents would come together to form Pangea. And in this vast, restless, and beautiful world, every organism, from the tiniest insect to the largest predator, played its part in a story billions of years in the making. Floating continents and drifting lands. Before Pangea, the continents were scattered like pieces of a puzzle, drifting across a vast ocean, each one moving slowly on the molten currents beneath the surface. Islands and landmasses were separated by wide stretches of water, creating isolated ecosystems where life evolved in unique ways. The edges of these lands were jagged and uneven, constantly reshaped by erosion, volcanic activity, and tectonic shifts. Shallow seas lapped at their shores, teeming with tiny organisms that formed the base of complex food chains. Mountains rose, abruptly, casting shadows over valleys filled with rivers and streams that carved the earth over millennia. Winds carried dust and spores across oceans, bringing life to distant lands. Volcanoes erupted frequently, spreading ash and lava that enriched the soil and shaped landscapes. Forests of towering ferns and primitive plants thrived near water sources, while drier areas hosted hardy shrubs and early grasses. Swamps and marshlands provided shelter for amphibians venturing onto land. The climate varied widely across regions, from scorching equatorial lands to cooler polar zones. Early reptiles slithered along rocky cliffs, while insects crawled and flew in abundance. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of minerals from the sea. Ocean currents carried nutrients and connected distant habitats. Lightning storms struck frequently, igniting small fires that changed the landscape. Rain nourished plants and carved river channels through soil and stone. The land masses were alive, constantly shifting, creating new opportunities for life to adapt. Each ecosystem was a delicate balance of predator and prey. The scattered continents slowly set the stage for the eventual unification of Pangea. Life flourished in pockets, yet remained fragile under the relentless forces of the planet. Every movement of land, wave, and wind shaped the destiny of Earth's early inhabitants. Oceans, alive with early life. The oceans before Pangea were vast, deep, and teeming with strange forms of life, many unlike anything that exists today. Tiny, glowing organisms drifted through the water, forming the base of the food chain, while larger predators patrolled the depths in silence. Coral-like structures began forming, providing shelter for fish and early crustaceans. Massive tidal Waves and shifting currents constantly reshaped coastlines and underwater terrains. Shallow seas hosted thriving nurseries for amphibians and primitive fish, where survival was a delicate balance of skill and chance. Jellyfish-like creatures floated with the currents, while trilobites crawled along sandy bottoms, their armored bodies reflecting light. In some regions, underwater volcanoes created new land and minerals, enriching the marine ecosystem. Swarms of small predators darted through schools of plankton, hunting relentlessly to sustain themselves. The ocean surface was alive with movement, as early insects and flying creatures hovered near shores. Tides influenced the development of estuaries, marshes, and lagoons where life could flourish. Deep currents carried nutrients far across the planet, connecting distant ecosystems in unseen ways. Sea temperature varied, creating zones of extreme diversity and competition. Ice sheets in polar oceans reflected sunlight, while warmer waters near the equator allowed faster growth of life. Some predators grew enormous, dominating their environment with stealth and strength. Symbiotic relationships began forming as different species relied on one another for survival. The ocean floor held hidden valleys and trenches, home to life yet to be discovered. Waves lapped against rocky coasts, carrying nutrients into tidal pools. Underwater storms churned sediments and shaped the seafloor, influencing evolution. Every corner of the oceans was alive, a stage for survival, adaptation, and growth, preparing life for the eventual unification of continents. Forests of giants forests before Pangea were dominated by massive ferns, horsetails, and primitive trees that reached skyward, forming dense, shadowed canopies. The ground was soft with mosses, fallen leaves, and decaying plant matter, providing fertile soil for new life to emerge. Early amphibians moved cautiously through the undergrowth, seeking food and shelter among roots and puddles. Insects of enormous proportions crawled and flew, pollinating plants and sustaining food chains. Rivers and streams wound through the forests, their waters reflecting light and nourishing plants and animals. Lightning storms frequently ignited small fires, clearing old vegetation and allowing new growth to flourish. Volcanic ash enriched soil, making some regions surprisingly lush despite a harsh climate. The air was humid and heavy, filled with the scents of wet earth, resin, and vegetation. Early reptiles slithered along branches, hunting insects or resting in the shade. Some trees bore seeds that were dispersed by wind or water, spreading life across distances. Forest floors were dotted with fungi and mosses, breaking down organic matter and returning nutrients to the soil. Predators lurked among roots and fallen logs, waiting for unsuspecting prey. Birds had not yet evolved, leaving insects and reptiles to dominate aerial and terrestrial niches. Rainfall was frequent, creating streams, ponds, and wetlands within the forests. Swamps formed in low-lying areas, rich in algae and nutrients, feeding amphibians and reptiles. Early mammals' ancestors burrowed underground, escaping predators and seeking food. Each forest was a complex ecosystem, vibrant with life, yet fragile under climate changes. Seasonal shifts influenced migration, feeding, and reproduction patterns of early species. The canopy created microclimates that protected and sustained life, a delicate interplay between light, water, and growth. These forests were the lungs of early Earth, producing oxygen and sustaining countless forms of life across continents. Predators of land and sea before Pangea. Predation was a driving force, shaping behavior, adaptation, and survival among early species. Oceans were dominated by large fish and cephalopod-like creatures, hunting smaller organisms with precision. On land, early reptiles and amphibians competed fiercely for food, territory, and mates, each species carving its niche. Insects served as both hunters and prey, their enormous sizes creating an intimidating presence in forests and wetlands. Predators adapted specialized methods of hunting, from ambush to pursuit, honing skills that would echo through evolution. Smaller creatures developed camouflage, burrowing habits, and defensive structures to survive relentless pressure. Rivers were patrolled by amphibians and primitive fish, while crocodile-like predators waited near shores for opportunities. Mountain cliffs and rocky outcrops sheltered creatures that could ambush prey from above. Swamps and marshes provided hiding spots for smaller animals, offering temporary reprieve from larger hunters. The ocean floor held predators that relied on stealth, speed, and sensory adaptations to catch their prey. Insects and arthropods became skilled hunters, using claws, stingers, or rapid movements. Life was a constant test of endurance, adaptation, and instinct, shaping evolution at every level. Some predators grew massive, dominating their ecosystems and forcing smaller creatures to adapt or perish. Early mammals' ancestors relied on speed and concealment to avoid predators. Vegetation provided cover, hunting grounds, and escape routes for various species. Even plants evolved defensive mechanisms like spines and toxins to survive herbivorous attacks. The balance of ecosystems depended on predation, competition, and survival strategies. Natural disasters like storms, floods, and volcanic activity added additional challenges. Predators and prey formed interconnected webs of life, each influencing the evolution of the other. Survival was not guaranteed, but adaptation was constant, shaping Earth's diverse pre-Pangea life. Volcanic landscapes and fiery Earth volcanoes before Pangea were active and frequent, shaping landscapes with molten rivers, ash clouds, and fiery eruptions. Lava flows created new land, destroying forests and altering ecosystems in their path. Ash filled the skies, blocking sunlight, cooling regions, and affecting plant growth for miles. Volcanic minerals enriched soil, allowing new plant species to take root in freshly formed land. Mountains formed and crumbled under volcanic activity, creating rugged terrains and deep valleys. Rivers of molten rock met seas, causing steam and chemical reactions that shaped coastlines. Wildlife adapted to these harsh conditions, fleeing or hiding from eruptions, finding shelter in caves, or burrowing underground. Clouds of smoke carried particles across continents, affecting climate and rainfall patterns. Forests near volcanoes regenerated quickly due to nutrient-rich ash, creating pockets of abundant growth. Aquatic life in rivers and oceans adapted to sudden changes in temperature and chemistry. Lightning frequently struck volcanic peaks, igniting secondary fires in nearby forests. Swamps and wetlands near volcanic regions experienced temporary destruction followed by rapid regrowth. Predators adjusted hunting strategies as terrain changed unpredictably. Insects and amphibians thrived in new habitats created by lava flows, cooling into fertile land. Glacial regions near volcanoes experienced melt and floods, shaping rivers and plains downstream. Early plants and fungi colonized barren lava fields, returning life to devastated areas. Tectonic activity continued, shifting land masses and creating new environmental challenges. Life was resilient, adapting quickly to fiery landscapes and sudden transformations. These volcanic regions served as catalysts for evolution, driving survival and adaptation. Earth was a planet in motion, fiery and dynamic, constantly shaping the destiny of life. Shallow seas and coastal wonders. Shallow seas before Pangea were vibrant ecosystems teeming with primitive life, serving as nurseries for fish, amphibians, and early crustaceans. Coral-like structures and algae formed habitats, sheltering countless small organisms from larger predators. Tides shaped sandbanks, mudflats, and lagoons, creating feeding grounds and nurseries for young animals. Sea currents carried nutrients, connecting distant coastal regions and fostering biodiversity. Large predators patrolled shallow waters, hunting fish and crustaceans with efficiency and speed. Floating plants and algae provided oxygen and sustenance, supporting complex food webs. Amphibians ventured from land to water, adapting to both environments with agility. The shoreline was dotted with tidal pools, each a microcosm of life, vibrant and fragile. Birds had yet to evolve, leaving insects and flying arthropods to dominate aerial niches above the water. Sunlight penetrated shallow waters, nurturing photosynthetic life and stimulating growth. Storms and waves reshaped beaches, moving sand and shells, altering habitats. Coastal reefs began forming, offering shelter and protection for vulnerable species. Predators adapted hunting techniques to tidal movements, waiting for prey to be trapped or slowed by receding water. Mollusks and crustaceans thrived, filtering nutrients and cleaning ecosystems. Waves brought food, debris, and nutrients to shorelines, sustaining plants and animals. Intertidal zones were rich with activity, a constant dance of predator and prey. Early life experimented with adaptations to survive both land and water, testing limits in these transitional zones. Salinity, temperature, and tides created selective pressures that shaped evolution. Shallow seas were delicate yet abundant, cradles of early life and stages for survival, adaptation, and growth. Climate and temperature shifts before Pangea. The climate of Earth varied dramatically from region to region, shaping life in profound ways. Equatorial regions were warm and humid, fostering dense forests and thriving ecosystems. Polar regions were cold and icy, covered with glaciers that advanced and retreated over millennia. Seasonal storms brought rainfall, nourishing plants, rivers, and wetlands. Droughts created challenges, forcing species to adapt or perish. Ocean currents regulated temperature, distributing heat across continents and influencing weather patterns. Volcanoes altered climate locally and globally, blocking sunlight or enriching soil. Winds carried moisture and seeds across long distances, connecting ecosystems in subtle ways. Temperature fluctuations shaped migration, feeding habits, and reproductive cycles of animals. Swamps and marshlands provided microclimates for species sensitive to extremes. Desert regions emerged in areas of low rainfall, testing the resilience of plants and animals. Rainforests flourished near rivers, with thick vegetation providing shelter and food. Early amphibians relied on humid regions to prevent desiccation, while reptiles adapted to drier lands. Glaciers carved valleys, shaping rivers and basins for future habitats. Storms sculpted coastlines. Temperature influenced ocean chemistry, affecting plankton, fish, and coral development. Microclimates within forests and mountains created pockets of biodiversity. The sun's position and intensity varied, impacting photosynthesis and plant growth. Life evolved strategies to survive extremes, from burrowing to nocturnal habits. Climate was a constant, shaping the diversity, adaptation, and survival of life across the planet. The rise of early reptiles before Pangea were among the first animals to fully embrace terrestrial life, venturing far from water to explore new habitats. Their tough, scaly skin protected against drying, allowing survival in diverse climates. Early reptiles developed strong limbs for walking, climbing, and running across uneven terrain. Predatory reptiles hunted amphibians, insects, and smaller reptiles with precision and stealth. Some grew enormous, dominating landscapes, while others relied on camouflage and agility. Burrows and rocky shelters offered protection from predators and harsh weather. Reproductive adaptations allowed eggs to survive on land, freeing reptiles from dependence on water for breeding. Social interactions were minimal, focused mainly on territory and survival. The diversity of species reflected adaptation to different climates, food sources, and ecological niches. Reptiles explored mountains, valleys, swamps, and deserts, gradually populating continents. Many were slow-moving ambush predators, while others were agile hunters chasing prey across forests. Scales provided defense, while coloration aided in concealment. Early reptiles coexisted with amphibians, insects, and the first mammal ancestors, each competing for resources. Survival strategies included hunting in packs or solitude, hiding or fleeing. Their presence influenced ecosystems, shaping prey, populations, and vegetation. Environmental pressures, from storms to volcanic activity, tested resilience. Adaptations allowed reptiles to endure drastic climate fluctuations. Over time, these early reptiles laid the foundation for future evolutionary lines, dominating land. Before Pangea, life on Earth was becoming increasingly complex, mobile, and resilient under reptilian influence. Swamps, marshes, and wetland swamps and wetlands before Pangea were lush, fertile landscapes teeming with amphibians, insects, and small reptiles. Water levels fluctuated with rainfall, tides, and melting glaciers, creating dynamic habitats. Plants like ferns, mosses, and primitive trees thrived in saturated soil, providing shelter and food. Early amphibians relied on water for reproduction, moving cautiously between ponds and marshes. Predators lurked in reeds and undergrowth, ambushing unsuspecting prey with patience. Insects thrived, pollinating plants and serving as food for larger species. Nutrient-rich, water-supported algae, small crustaceans, and plankton, forming the base of complex food webs. Fallen vegetation decomposed, enriching soil and sustaining plant growth. Swamp temperatures varied, influencing species behavior and reproduction cycles. Burrowing animals used mud and roots for protection. Storms and floods reshaped landscapes, creating new channels, ponds, and sediment deposits. Predation, competition, and resource availability drove adaptation and evolution. Vegetation density provided hiding spots for prey, affecting predator strategies. Wetlands acted as water reservoirs, moderating regional climates. Amphibious creatures developed specialized limbs and skin for dual habitats. Seasonal shifts created cycles of abundance and scarcity, testing survival skills. Fungi and microorganisms played key roles in decomposition and nutrient cycling. Swamps were alive with movement, sound, and activity, a thriving ecosystem of pre-Pangea Earth. Life in these wetlands was resilient, adaptive, and interconnected, setting the stage for further evolutionary innovation. Preparing for Pangea. Before the continents collided, Earth was a planet in motion, with land masses slowly drifting toward each other over millions of years. Tectonic activity shifted mountains, opened seas, and connected ecosystems in unexpected ways. Rivers carved valleys, seas formed shallow basins, and volcanic activity shaped fertile plains. Species migrated gradually, encountering new habitats, competition, and predators. Climate changes pushed life to adapt, innovate, and survive. Floating islands collided occasionally, creating land bridges that allowed movement and mixing of species. Ocean currents redistributed nutrients, seeds, and larvae across vast distances. Some organisms thrived in isolation, while others exploited new connections for expansion. Evolution accelerated in response to changing environments, selective pressures, and new opportunities. Forests, swamps, mountains, and deserts all evolved alongside drifting landmasses. Life experimented with new strategies for survival, growth, and reproduction. Predators and prey adapted to shifting landscapes and climate variations. Reptiles and amphibians spread across continents, exploring new niches. Coastal regions changed with tides, storms, and sea level fluctuations. Early mammals burrowed, insects flew, and amphibians hopped across new terrain. The planet's energy, heat, and motion sculpted continents and ecosystems. Every landmass, river, and ocean played a role in shaping the future supercontinent. Earth was a dynamic, living entity, preparing for a momentous transformation. Soon, these scattered lands would unite as Pangea, forever altering the course of life. Life on the verge of change as Earth approached the era of Pangea. Life was vibrant, diverse, and on the cusp of dramatic transformation. Forests stretched across continents, oceans teemed with creatures, and wetlands hosted complex ecosystems. Predators and prey coexisted in a delicate balance, constantly influenced by climate, geography, and resources. Reptiles, amphibians, insects, and early mammal ancestors navigated a world of shifting continents. Evolutionary pressure drove adaptation, innovation, and survival strategies. Isolated species began encountering new competition as drifting lands collided. Coastal regions, rivers, and seas connected ecosystems in unprecedented ways. Volcanic activity, storms, and tidal shifts challenged life, forcing resilience. Plants evolved mechanisms to disperse seeds and colonize new areas rapidly. Microorganisms broke down organic material, returning nutrients and sustaining growth. Mountains and valleys created unique microclimates, shaping life in every niche. Predators honed hunting skills, while prey developed defense, camouflage, and evasion. Swamps and marshes nurtured amphibians and early reptiles, while shallow seas provided protection and food. Climate fluctuations influenced migration, reproduction, and survival strategies. Life had become interconnected, a complex web of cause and effect. Species diversity increased, preparing for the monumental changes of supercontinent formation. Every organism, from the smallest insect to the largest predator, played a role in evolution. The world was alive, dynamic, and full of potential, teetering on the edge of one of its greatest transformations. Soon, the scattered continents would merge, and life would enter a new era of adaptation, diversity, and survival. Rivers carving the earth, rivers before Pangea were lifelines, winding through forests, plains, and mountains, carving valleys and shaping landscapes over millennia. Their waters carried nutrients, sediments, and organisms across continents, connecting ecosystems in subtle ways. Shallow streams nurtured amphibians and small reptiles, while larger rivers supported fish and early crustaceans. Seasonal flooding deposited fertile soil along banks, allowing vegetation to flourish. Rapids and waterfalls created natural barriers, influencing migration and adaptation. Rivers meandered across plains, forming oxbow lakes and wetlands, teeming with life. Predators patrolled riverbanks, hunting creatures drawn to water for sustenance. Algae and floating plants thrived in calm pools, supporting microscopic life and food chains. Tides and rainfall affected flow, creating dynamic environments that tested the resilience of species. Riverbeds shifted with storms, floods, and tectonic activity, reshaping habitats. Vegetation along rivers provided shade, food, and shelter for countless organisms. Insects and amphibians exploited the edge of water and land, thriving in transitional zones. Aquatic plants anchored sediment and stabilized banks, shaping river ecology. Rivers were a source of life, movement, and opportunity, allowing species to disperse and adapt. They carved deep valleys and canyons that would last for millions of years. Streams connected distant lakes and wetlands, supporting migration routes. Predators learned to ambush prey near water, while prey developed defenses and escape strategies. Every river was a dynamic artery of life, constantly changing, nurturing, and sustaining ecosystems across Pangea Earth. The first glimmers of night and day for Pangea. The cycle of night and day influenced life profoundly, guiding behavior, feeding, and rest patterns. Sunlight warmed equatorial lands, energizing plants and stimulating photosynthesis. Shadows shifted across forests, rivers, and mountains, creating temporary shelters and hunting grounds. Nocturnal predators emerged, adapting to cooler temperatures and darkness to ambush prey. Insects and amphibians became active at different times, balancing predation and survival. Early marine life responded to tidal rhythms, emerging during daylight or darkness, depending on species. The polar regions experienced extended periods of light and dark, influencing migration and reproductive cycles. Clouds and storms altered light patterns, creating ephemeral changes in behavior and movement. Plant growth followed solar patterns, with leaves adjusting to maximize energy absorption. Early reptiles basked in sunlight to regulate body temperature, moving to shade or burrows as needed. Nighttime brought cooling winds and the sound of nocturnal activity, a symphony of unseen life. Moonlight reflected off water, guiding nocturnal hunters and travelers. Aurora-like phenomena occasionally illuminated polar skies, casting an ethereal glow over frozen landscapes. Predators adapted senses to detect prey in low light, while prey species developed camouflage and alertness. Dawn and dusk became transitional periods, bustling with activity and caution. The cycle of night and day created structure, rhythm, and opportunity for life to adapt and thrive. Shadows offered concealment, warmth, or rest depending on the species. Plants, animals, and insects synchronized behavior with light, forming a balanced interplay of survival. Each rotation of Earth shaped life's timing, influencing evolution, competition, and coexistence. Wind and weather shaping life before Pangea. Wind patterns swept across continents and oceans, carrying moisture, seeds, and dust, shaping life in countless ways. Storms brought heavy rainfall, flooding lowlands and nourishing forests, swamps, and rivers. Gentle breezes carried pollen, spores, and seeds across great distances, enabling plants to colonize new areas. Hurricanes and cyclones occasionally swept through regions, testing resilience and forcing adaptation. Desert winds carved dunes and moved sand, creating arid yet dynamic habitats. Lightning ignited fires, clearing old vegetation and allowing new growth to emerge. Storms sculpted coastlines, eroded mountains, and redistributed nutrients across ecosystems. Air currents influenced ocean currents, temperature, and weather patterns, indirectly shaping marine life. Winds cooled exposed land, preventing overheating in tropical regions and creating microclimates in forests and valleys. Early creatures sought shelter during storms, burrowing, climbing, or hiding among vegetation. Rainfall patterns determined river levels, wetlands, and the availability of fresh water. Droughts tested survival skills, forcing migration, hibernation, or adaptation. Flying insects relied on wind for dispersal, navigating currents to find food or mates. Clouds formed, bringing precipitation, shade, and cooling effects. Mountain ranges influenced local wind patterns, creating rain shadows and fertile regions. Seasonal storms created cycles of abundance and scarcity, influencing behavior and reproduction. Volcanic eruptions and ash clouds altered atmospheric conditions, impacting climate and life temporarily. Life evolved strategies to cope with wind, storms, and environmental change. The atmosphere was a powerful sculptor, shaping continents, ecosystems, and survival. Insects ruling the skies in the era before Pangea. Insects dominated both land and air, thriving in a world without birds. giant dragonfly-like species patrolled skies, hunting smaller prey with speed and precision. Winged insects explored every corner of forests, swamps, and rivers, pollinating plants and dispersing seeds. Crawling arthropods roamed the forest floor, marshes, and riverbanks, feeding on detritus, plants, or smaller creatures. Some insects developed defensive mechanisms like spines, stingers, or camouflage to survive predators. Swarms of insects created moving shadows and sounds that echoed across landscapes. Their activity influenced plant evolution, driving growth, reproduction, and dispersal strategies. Many species were nocturnal, taking advantage of darkness to hunt or avoid predation. Water-adapted insects thrived in rivers, ponds, and tidal flats, bridging aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Predators learned to track insect movement, while prey species evolved speed and hiding techniques. The abundance of insects provided a reliable food source for amphibians, reptiles, and early mammal ancestors. Early ecosystems were interconnected by insects, forming invisible threads of life that supported survival. Flight allowed exploration, colonization, and escape, giving insects evolutionary advantage. Insects' life cycles shaped population dynamics, influencing predator-prey interactions. Seasonal patterns affected breeding, feeding, and dispersal. Even in volcanic or storm-affected regions, insects survived, adapting rapidly. The resilience, diversity, and abundance of insects made them critical architects of pre-Pangea life. Every forest, swamp, and coastal region was alive with their presence. Insects were masters of survival, shaping ecosystems silently yet profoundly. Life on Earth would evolve alongside their influence for millions of years. Amphibians and the first steps on land. Amphibians before Pangea were pioneers, bridging the watery world of the seas with the dry land of scattered continents. Their semi-permeable skin required moisture, making swamps, rivers, and wetlands essential for survival. Limbs evolved to navigate land, while gills or lungs allowed breathing in water and air. Predation pressures pushed amphibians to develop speed, camouflage, and burrowing skills. Early amphibians fed on insects, small crustaceans, and plants, experimenting with diverse diets. Their reproductive strategies tied them to water, laying eggs in ponds, streams, or marshes. Seasonal migration followed rainfall, temperature, and food availability. Skin secretions helped protect against dehydration, predators, or microbes. Their movements created paths and burrows that influenced soil and vegetation patterns. Interactions with reptiles, insects, and early mammals shaped ecological balance. Swamps and marshes provided shelter and hunting grounds, rich with nutrients. Flooding and drought-forced adaptability, teaching amphibians resilience. Vocalizations and signals likely aided communication and mating. Predators from land and water hunted them relentlessly, driving evolutionary change. Amphibians' presence influenced insect populations, plant dispersal, and microbial communities. They served as both predator and prey in complex food webs. Their journey onto land marked a significant evolutionary milestone. Amphibians shaped ecosystems, influenced climate adaptation, and prepared habitats for future terrestrial life. Early amphibians were a testament to life's ingenuity. surviving in a world both watery and terrestrial. Glaciers and ice-covered regions even before Pangea. Earth's polar regions were home to glaciers and ice-covered landscapes that shaped continents and ecosystems. Glaciers advanced and retreated with climate cycles, carving valleys, fjords, and basins. Ice sheets reflected sunlight, influencing global temperature and local climate. Meltwater nourished rivers, lakes, and wetlands, supporting aquatic and terrestrial life. Animals adapted to extreme cold with specialized behaviors, seeking shelter, burrowing, or migrating seasonally. Ice movement ground rocks into soil, creating fertile regions downstream. Sea levels fluctuated with glacial growth and retreat, connecting or isolating landmasses. Polar winds influenced global climate, transporting cold air toward equatorial regions. Glaciers acted as natural barriers, shaping migration patterns and species distribution. Seasonal light cycles in polar regions affected feeding, reproduction, and activity. Early life found niches in coastal areas, under ice shelves, or in meltwater pools. Icebergs carried nutrients and organisms across oceans, influencing marine life. Volcanic activity under ice created geothermal warmth, sustaining pockets of life. Glacial valleys became rivers, plains, and wetlands when ice melted, shaping ecosystems. Cold-adapted plants and microorganisms thrived, contributing to nutrient cycling. Predators in icy regions adapted hunting techniques to frozen terrain. Ice-covered lands tested resilience and drove evolutionary innovation. Seasonal thaw and freeze created dynamic habitats that life exploited. Glaciers were silent sculptors, shaping continents, climate, and survival before Pangea. Plant evolution and adaptation. Plants before Pangea were diverse, evolving strategies to survive in scattered continents, varied climates, and shifting soils. Ferns and horsetails dominated forests, reaching great heights to capture sunlight. Primitive trees developed sturdy trunks and roots, anchoring themselves against winds and erosion. Mosses and algae colonized rocks, wetlands, and riverbanks, preparing soil for larger plants. Seed-bearing plants emerged, enabling dispersal across dry lands and water. Plant reproduction relied on spores, seeds, or water for fertilization, shaping growth patterns. Adaptations like thick leaves, spines, or toxins provided defense against herbivores. Seasonal variation influenced growth, flowering, and seed production. Roots penetrated deep soil layers, absorbing water and nutrients while stabilizing landscapes. Swamps and marshes supported water-loving plants, influencing amphibian and insect populations. Coastal plants withstood tides, saltwater, and storms, creating protective barriers. Forest canopies created microclimates, providing shade, humidity, and shelter for animals. Leaf structure, size, and shape evolved to optimize photosynthesis in diverse conditions. Plant-animal interactions shaped ecosystems, from pollination to seed dispersal. Early fungi and microorganisms supported plant growth by decomposing organic material. Droughts and floods tested resilience, driving adaptation and survival strategies. Volcanic soil and ash-enriched regions, fostering rapid growth. Nutrient cycling between plants, soil, and water maintained ecosystem health. Plants shaped landscapes, influenced climate, and sustained life in every corner of Pangea Earth. Volcanic islands and new habitats. Volcanic islands before Pangea were cradles of new life, rising from oceans in dramatic eruptions, creating fertile lands and unique habitats. Lava cooled into rock, providing surfaces for pioneer plants and microorganisms. Birds were absent, but insects and wind carried spores, seeds, and larvae to these isolated islands. Freshwater ponds formed in depressions, sustaining amphibians and small reptiles. Volcanic minerals enriched soil, allowing forests and swamps to flourish rapidly. Predators and prey colonized these islands, adapting to limited space and resources. Storms reshaped shorelines, moved sand, and distributed nutrients. Islands served as testing grounds for life, where isolation encouraged rapid evolution and experimentation. Tides and currents connected islands sporadically, enabling occasional migration and gene flow. Insects and arthropods thrived, forming the backbone of food webs. Volcanic heat created geothermal zones that supported microclimates and unique ecosystems. Coastal reefs and shallow seas nurtured marine life, providing abundant food. Plant growth stabilized soil, prevented erosion, and supported diverse animal life. Isolation led to unique adaptations, behaviors, and survival strategies. Flooding, storms, and volcanic activity challenged life, but also created opportunity. Swamps and marshes developed in low areas, enriching biodiversity. Early reptiles explored the land, while amphibians relied on abundant water. Life flourished against odds, shaping island ecosystems that reflected Earth's adaptability. Bridges between worlds before Pangea. Temporary land bridges connected isolated continents, allowing species to migrate, compete, and mix in new ways. Tectonic shifts occasionally exposed shallow seabeds, creating pathways for animals, plants, and insects. These connections allowed gene flow, introducing new traits and influencing evolution. Predators discovered new hunting grounds, while prey learned to adapt to novel threats. Rivers, streams, and tidal flats facilitated movement across bridges, offering water and sustenance. Plant spores and seeds spread, colonizing lands previously unreachable. Seasonal changes affected bridge accessibility, creating cycles of isolation and connectivity. Amphibians and reptiles ventured cautiously, exploiting new niches along the way. Coastal and shallow marine life used bridges to expand territories and reproduce in new environments. Volcanic islands sometimes acted as stepping stones between larger landmasses. Isolation, followed by reconnection, drove adaptation, competition, and diversification. Predatory strategies evolved in response to new prey and competitors. Plants adapted to new soil types, climate conditions, and interactions with animals. Insects and arthropods dispersed across bridges, establishing populations in distant lands. Microorganisms and fungi followed, aiding nutrient cycling and ecosystem development. Bridges reshaped distribution patterns, influencing the evolutionary trajectory of species. Life tested limits, exploring every opportunity these pathways offered. Connectivity spurred adaptation, diversity, and resilience, laying groundwork for future supercontinent ecosystems. Each land bridge was a fleeting yet critical link between worlds, shaping life before Pangea. Tectonic movements and shifting Earth before Pangea. The Earth's crust was restless, with tectonic plates drifting slowly across molten layers beneath. Mountains rose and fell, reshaping valleys, plains, and oceans in a constant dance. Earthquakes rattled landscapes, shifting rivers and reshaping habitats. Volcanoes erupted unpredictably, creating new land and destroying old ecosystems. Continental edges collided occasionally, forming temporary ranges and plateaus. Ocean floors shifted, altering currents, tides, and marine habitats. Islands emerged and submerged, changing migration routes for land and aquatic species. Fault lines and rifts influenced climate patterns, rainfall and wind flow. Soil and mineral distribution changed with plate movement, affecting plant growth. Isolated species encountered new competitors as lands drifted closer together. Predators adjusted hunting strategies to shifting terrain, while prey evolved new defenses. Forests adapted to changes in slope, sunlight, and water availability. Swamps and wetlands formed in depressions created by tectonic activity. Rivers carved canyons, transported nutrients, and linked distant ecosystems. Glaciers advanced or retreated, influenced by tectonics and climate. Coastal areas rose or sank, altering habitats for amphibians and reptiles. Life evolved resilience, exploiting opportunities and surviving disasters. Adaptation became essential. As landscapes and climates shifted, the planet was alive with motion, shaping life before Pangea's formation. The dawn of biodiversity life before Pangea displayed remarkable diversity, adapting to countless niches across scattered continents. Forests, swamps, mountains, and rivers each hosted unique species, some small and fragile, others massive and dominant. Amphibians, early reptiles, and insects flourished alongside primitive plant life. Ocean ecosystems ranged from shallow nurseries to deep predator-filled trenches. Coastal regions were bustling with activity, from tidal flats to coral-like structures. Climate variations created selective pressures, shaping survival strategies. Predators and prey co-evolved, influencing evolution in intricate ways. Seasonal changes dictated reproductive cycles, migration, and feeding habits. Isolation of continents encouraged unique adaptations, while occasional land bridges enabled mixing. Volcanic regions, glaciers, and deserts challenged life, forcing innovation and resilience. Swamps and wetlands nurtured amphibians and insects, creating vibrant microhabitats. Early mammals, ancestors burrowed and scavenged, navigating complex environments. Plants evolved diverse structures for defense, reproduction, and sunlight capture. Insects and arthropods thrived in the absence of birds, dominating aerial and terrestrial niches. Rivers and shallow seas connected ecosystems, enabling dispersal and genetic diversity. Predatory fish and cephalopods ruled the oceans, hunting smaller organisms with precision. Microorganisms and fungi recycled nutrients, sustaining plants and animals. Life was abundant, adaptive, and interconnected, a prelude to Pangea's supercontinent era. Shallow seas and coastal marvels before Pangea. Shallow seas stretched along continental edges, teeming with early life forms. Small fish, crustaceans, and amphibians navigated tidal flats, reefs, and lagoons. Algae, seaweeds, and primitive coral-like structures provided shelter and food. Waves reshaped shorelines, depositing sand, nutrients, and debris that enriched ecosystems. Predators prowled shallow waters, ambushing prey near rivers and marshes. Sea levels fluctuated, connecting or isolating habitats over time. Sunlight penetrated clear waters, supporting photosynthesis and encouraging growth. Amphibians ventured between land and water, exploiting both niches. Insects and arthropods relied on coastal vegetation for food, shelter, and reproduction. Seasonal storms stirred sediments, redistributing nutrients and shaping marine environments. Coastal ecosystems were delicate yet abundant, a cradle for experimentation and evolution. Tides brought in fresh nutrients, while erosion exposed minerals for plant growth. Predators adapted hunting strategies to tides and currents. Swallow water zones became nurseries for young fish and amphibians. Waves carried seeds and spores, enabling plant dispersal along shores. Intertidal zones buzzed with activity, a constant interplay of predator, prey, and environment. Shallow seas connected distant ecosystems, creating opportunities for migration and evolution. Life thrived in these transitional zones, balancing survival, reproduction, and growth. Coastal habitats were a dynamic stage, preparing life for the merging continents of Pangea. Forests and the lungs of early Earth forests before Pangea were lush, dense, and towering, dominated by ferns, horsetails, and primitive trees reaching skyward. Canopies created microclimates, sheltering animals from storms, heat, and predators. Forest floors were soft with mosses, fallen leaves, and decaying vegetation, providing fertile ground for new growth. Early amphibians slithered through undergrowth, hunting insects and avoiding predators. Insects buzzed, crawled, and thrived, pollinating plants and serving as food for larger species. Rivers, streams, and swamps threaded through forests, nourishing plants and animals. Volcanic ash enriched soil, fostering rapid regeneration after fires or eruptions. Predators lurked among roots, logs, and dense foliage, ambushing prey with patience. Seasonal rains shaped the soil, replenished rivers, and influenced plant growth. Swamps and wetlands developed within forested regions, nurturing amphibians and insects. Forest density encouraged adaptation, camouflage, and specialized hunting strategies. Early reptiles explored tree branches, riverbanks, and rocky outcrops in search of food. Burrowing animals and early mammal ancestors found shelter underground. Fungi and microorganisms recycled nutrients, sustaining vibrant ecosystems. Lightning occasionally struck, igniting fires that cleared paths and enriched soil. Canopies filtered sunlight, creating patterns of light and shadow that guided movement and behavior. Forests were hubs of activity, life, and adaptation, forming essential ecosystems. The interplay of water, plants, and animals created balance and diversity. Forests served as the lungs of early Earth, producing oxygen and supporting life across continents. The age of amphibians before Pangea were versatile, inhabiting swamps, rivers, forests, and marshes, bridging water and land. Their skin required moisture, linking them to aquatic habitats for survival and reproduction. Limbs evolved for movement on land, while gills or lungs allowed dual respiration. Amphibians hunted insects, crustaceans, and smaller species, adapting to diverse diets. Predators included early reptiles and large aquatic creatures, pushing amphibians to develop camouflage and evasive strategies. Seasonal flooding created new habitats, while droughts tested resilience. Reproductive cycles followed water availability, ensuring eggs and larvae survived. Burrows, logs, and vegetation provided shelter from predators and harsh climates. Amphibians influenced insect populations, plant dispersal, and nutrient cycling. Swamps and wetlands acted as nurseries, supporting multiple generations. Early amphibians experimented with body size, behavior, and mobility, shaping future evolutionary paths. Vocalizations likely helped communication and mating. Competition drove innovation, encouraging speed, stealth, and agility. Amphibians played dual roles as predators and prey, linking ecosystems together. Rivers and lakes provided migration routes, expanding populations. Interaction with early reptiles, insects, and mammals shaped ecosystems. Amphibians thrived despite storms, floods, and volcanic activity. Their presence marked a pivotal stage in life's transition from water to land, adaptive, resilient, and essential. Amphibians prepared Earth's ecosystems for Pangea's convergence. Predators of a prehistoric world, predation before Pangea shaped survival, behavior, and evolution across land and sea. Large fish and cephalopods ruled oceans, hunting smaller organisms with precision. Early reptiles prowled forests, swamps, and plains, ambushing prey with patience and strategy. Amphibians fed on insects, smaller crustaceans, and each other, forming complex food webs. Insects hunted, scavenged, and defended themselves, influencing ecosystems in subtle ways. Seasonal storms and floods created hunting challenges, altering prey behavior. Vegetation provided cover for predators and prey alike, shaping ambush and escape strategies. Rivers and shallow seas were hunting grounds for amphibians and reptiles. Predators evolved speed, strength, camouflage, and sensory adaptations. Prey species developed defense, evasive movement, and hiding skills. Competition drove specialization, survival, and adaptation. Tides, currents, and seasonal changes influenced feeding opportunities. Coastal, forest, and swamp ecosystems hosted diverse predator-prey interactions. Insects dominated aerial and terrestrial niches, forming critical links in food chains. Predatory hierarchies shaped population balance and species diversity. Adaptation ensured survival through climate shifts, volcanic eruptions, and tectonic changes. Predators influenced plant evolution indirectly through herbivore population control. Each hunt, escape, or competition subtly guided evolution over millions of years. Life before Pangea was a theater of survival, adaptation, and balance, with predators as key players. Volcanic activity and changing landscapes. Volcanoes before Pangea sculpted continents, reshaped habitats, and influenced climate through eruptions and lava flows. Molten rock created new land, destroyed old forests, and enriched soil with minerals. Ash clouds blocked sunlight, cooled regions, and altered plant growth temporarily. Rivers of lava formed valleys, plains, and islands, creating new ecosystems. For colonization, volcanic mountains provided shelter, lookout points, and feeding grounds for terrestrial species. Aquatic life adapted to changes in water chemistry caused by eruptions. Predators and prey navigated shifting landscapes, developing resilience and adaptability. Lightning during eruptions ignited fires, clearing vegetation and enabling regrowth. Flooding from melted glaciers or rainfall changed river courses, shaping new habitats. Swamps and marshes re-emerged in volcanic depressions, supporting amphibians and insects. Plant spores and seeds colonized barren lava fields, spreading life across new land. Isolation encouraged unique adaptations and rapid evolution in localized populations. Volcanic islands acted as stepping stones for migration between continents. Soil fertility increased after eruptions, supporting dense forests and abundant life. Early reptiles, amphibians, and insects exploited new habitats for survival. Seasonal storms interacted with volcanic landscapes, adding unpredictability. Tectonic shifts continued alongside eruptions, reshaping coastlines and mountains. Life thrived in volcanic regions, adapting to heat, ash, and new terrain. Volcanoes were both destroyers and creators, shaping Earth's pre-Pangea world dynamically. Swamps, marshes, and wetlands. Swamps, marshes, and wetlands before Pangea were teeming with life, acting as cradles for amphibians, insects, and small reptiles. Water levels shifted with rainfall, tides, and glacial melt, creating dynamic and fluctuating habitats. Dense vegetation provided shelter, food, and breeding grounds for countless species. Fungi and microorganisms broke down organic matter, recycling nutrients for plant and animal life. Predators lurked among reeds, logs, and mud, ambushing prey with patience. Amphibians relied on water for reproduction, feeding, and mobility. Insects thrived, pollinating plants and forming vital links in food webs. Seasonal storms and floods reshaped landscapes, creating ponds, channels, and wetlands. Vegetation density influenced predator-prey interactions, offering concealment or hunting advantage. Soil and water chemistry shaped plant growth, microbial activity, and nutrient distribution. Reptiles and early mammals explored wetlands cautiously, seeking food and safety. Isolation allowed species to evolve unique adaptations in localized environments. Flood cycles and droughts tested survival, skills, and resilience. Swamps and wetlands supported biodiversity, linking terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Plant roots stabilized soil, prevented erosion, and nourished amphibians and insects. Early food chains formed intricate webs, balancing predators, herbivores, and wetlands acted as natural nurseries, supporting multiple generations of life. Life thrived despite seasonal changes, storms, and predators. Swamps, marshes, and wetlands were dynamic, life-giving habitats shaping pre-Pangea. Scattered lands gradually approached one another, setting the stage for Pangea formation. Tectonic forces moved mountains, rivers, and oceans, reshaping habitats and migration routes. Species encountered new neighbors, competition, and predators as isolation lessened. Climate patterns shifted with changing geography, influencing survival strategies. Land bridges emerged sporadically, allowing temporary movement between continents. Oceans expanded or contracted, connecting or isolating ecosystems. Life adapted to fluctuating conditions, thriving in some regions while retreating in others. Forests, swamps, deserts, and coastal zones were reshaped by tectonic activity. Volcanic eruptions and earthquakes created new opportunities for colonization and adaptation. Early reptiles, amphibians, insects, and mammal ancestors exploited emerging niches. Predators and prey adjusted hunting and survival strategies to new environments. Migration increased genetic diversity, encouraging evolution. Seasonal weather influenced breeding, feeding, and movement. Rivers carved valleys, transported nutrients, and linked habitats across drifting lands. Shallow seas nurtured aquatic species, while coastal zones served as transitional ecosystems. Life experimented with new adaptations, behaviors, and survival strategies. Evolution accelerated in response to environmental change and continental collision. Microorganisms, fungi, and plants spread across continents, supporting ecosystems. The stage was set for the ultimate unification of land and life in Pangea. Ocean giants of pre-Pangea for Pangea. The oceans were dominated by massive creatures, from giant fish to early cephalopods, ruling the deep waters with power and precision and coordination. Cephalopods used tentacles to capture, manipulate, and consume food while evading larger predators. Shallow seas teemed with smaller fish, crustaceans, and plankton, forming the base of complex food webs. Coral-like structures and algae provided shelter and food for countless organisms. Changes, allowing species to exploit different regions. Predators evolved sensory adaptations, detecting movement, vibration, and light in murky waters. Prey species developed armor, speed, and camouflage to survive relentless hunting. Insects and small amphibians occasionally ventured into coastal waters, interacting with marine life. Nutrient cycling supported plankton blooms, feeding larger creatures. Storms, volcanic activity, and tectonic shifts altered ocean habitats unpredictably. Seasonal fluctuations influenced breeding and migration patterns for fish and cephalopods. Ocean giants competed for territory mates and prey, driving evolution. Predatory pressure shaped the behavior, morphology, and intelligence of marine species. Shallow shelves acted as nurseries for young, while deep trenches offered refuge for older predators. Ocean currents distributed nutrients and life across vast distances. Life in the seas before Pangea was abundant, competitive, and dynamic, shaping evolution in profound ways. The oceans were a theater of survival, adaptation, and awe-inspiring power, sustaining life across Earth. Deserts and arid landscape for Pangea. Deserts and arid regions challenged life with scarcity, heat, and shifting sands. Sparse vegetation forced adaptation, with plants developing thick leaves, spines, and deep roots. Insects and arthropods thrived, exploiting limited resources efficiently. Burrowing provided shelter, moisture retention, and protection from predators. Seasonal rains transformed dry land temporarily, supporting short-lived blooms of plants and insects. Wind-shaped dunes exposed minerals and redistributed seeds, and spores. Landscapes, droughts, forced migration, hibernation, or adaptation to survive. Microorganisms and fungi persisted underground or in moist microhabitats, recycling nutrients. Desert rivers, when present, became vital oases, supporting life and facilitating dispersal. Isolated habitats encouraged unique adaptations, accelerating evolution. Temperature fluctuations between day and night tested thermoregulation and endurance. Desert landscapes were harsh yet dynamic, fostering resilience in flora and fauna. Migration and dispersal connected deserts to adjacent ecosystems. Evolutionary pressure in deserts encouraged speed, stealth, and resourcefulness. Life survived against odds, with every organism adapting to scarcity and extremes. Deserts shaped the toughness, strategy, and ingenuity of early Earth life. Coastal estuaries and life exchange. Coastal estuaries before Pangea were hubs of diversity, where freshwater rivers met salty oceans, creating rich, nutrient-laden waters. Fish, crustaceans, and amphibians thrived in these transitional zones, exploiting abundant food. Tides and seasonal floods reshaped mudflats, channels, and vegetation, influencing feeding and breeding. Birds were absent, but insects and reptiles adapted to exploit estuarine resources. Plants colonized intertidal zones, stabilizing soil and providing shelter. Predators patrolled shallow waters and mudflats, hunting opportunistically. Estuaries acted as migration routes, linking terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Seasonal storms deposited nutrients, reshaping habitats and replenishing food sources. Amphibians and reptiles relied on estuaries for reproduction, growth, and dispersal. Swamps and wetlands surrounding estuaries nurtured diverse life, forming critical ecological networks. Estuaries buffered floods, filtered sediments, and influenced water chemistry. Nutrient cycling supported algae, plankton, and higher trophic levels. Predation pressure encouraged camouflage, speed, and stealth in prey species. Estuaries were dynamic interfaces, constantly changing with tides, storms, and river flow. Life adapted to fluctuating salinity, temperature, and water levels. Small islands within estuaries provided safe havens for nesting, feeding, and refuge. Estuar ecosystems were rich, productive, and vital for species survival before Pangea. Coastal life in these zones formed interconnected networks, balancing freshwater and marine influence. Estuaries exemplified Earth's resilience, adaptability, and abundance. Swirling storms and extreme weather before Pangea. Storms and extreme weather shaped continents, rivers, and forests, testing the survival of plants and animals alike. Hurricanes, cyclones, and monsoons swept across landscapes, bringing heavy rain, flooding, and destruction. Lightning ignited fires, clearing vegetation and enriching soil for regrowth. Wind reshaped dunes, toppled trees, and redistributed seeds, influencing plant dispersal. Amphibians and reptiles sought shelter, burrowing or hiding to survive tempests. Rivers overflowed, connecting distant habitats and enabling migration. Seasonal patterns dictated storm frequency, intensity, and impact. Insects, arthropods, and small creatures adapted to evade predators during extreme conditions. Forest canopies shielded life from heavy rainfall, while wetlands absorbed excess water. Predators adapted hunting strategies to turbulent environments, exploiting prey movements. Microorganisms and fungi persisted in nutrient-rich soils after storms. Volcanic activity occasionally compounded weather extremes, altering climate and ecology. Tides, waves, and coastal flooding influenced marine and shoreline habitats. Adaptation to extreme weather shaped evolution, resilience, and survival strategies. Floods created temporary wetlands, benefiting amphibians and plants. Life developed flexibility, mobility, and cleverness to navigate unpredictability. Storms redistributed nutrients, maintained ecosystem health, and encouraged dispersal. Earth's climate was dynamic, challenging life while fostering diversity and innovation. Extreme weather molded the planet, preparing species for Pangea's convergence, the first forest canopus before Pangea. Forest canopies reached heights that created shadowed, humid microclimates beneath. Trees, ferns, and primitive plants formed dense networks of branches and leaves. Sunlight filtered through layers, influencing plant growth, photosynthesis, and movement of animals below. An undergrowth in search of food or refuge. Insects dominated aerial niches, pollinating, hunting, and dispersing seeds. Predators lurked in foliage, ambushing unsuspecting prey with precision. Canopies provided shelter from storms, heat, and predators, shaping behavior and evolution. Falling leaves and branches enriched forest floors, fueling decomposition and nutrient cycling. Seasonal variations in light and moisture influenced plant flowering, seed dispersal, and animal activity. Forest floors were soft, damp, and full of life, supporting amphibians, reptiles, and microorganisms. Swamps and wetlands integrated with forests, providing additional habitats. Birds were absent, leaving insects, amphibians, and early reptiles to dominate niches. Canopy gaps created microhabitats, encouraging diversity and specialization. Wind carried spores, seeds, and insects, connecting ecosystems. Forests shaped oxygen production, climate regulation, and shelter across continents. Evolution favored mobility, stealth, and survival in multi-layered habitats. Land-animal interactions maintained balance, food webs, and reproduction. Life thrived in forested complexity, with each layer influencing the other. Canopies were Earth's vertical landscapes, vital for biodiversity before Pangea. The spread of fungi and decomposers, before Pangea played a crucial role in recycling nutrients, sustaining plants, animals, and ecosystems. Mushrooms, molds, and primitive fungi thrived in damp forests, swamps, and riverbanks. Decomposition broke down dead plants, animals, and organic matter, enriching soil for new growth. Microorganisms partnered with plants, assisting nutrient absorption, growth, and resilience. Insects and arthropods aided decomposition by breaking down material into smaller parts. Floods and seasonal rains accelerated fungal growth, influencing ecosystem productivity. Nutrient-rich soil supported forests, wetlands, and coastal plants, creating stable habitats. Predators indirectly benefited from decomposers, as healthy plant populations ensured herbivore survival. Volcanic ash and floods introduced new minerals, boosting fungal growth. wetlands, and swamps provided ideal conditions for decomposition, recycling life into nutrients. Soil structure improved through microbial activity, supporting plant roots and water retention. Fungi adapted to extreme conditions, including droughts, floods, and temperature shifts. Symbiotic relationships enhanced resilience and ecosystem balance. Decomposition maintained life cycles, allowing continuity despite predation, storms, or disease. Insects, amphibians, and reptiles indirectly depended on decomposers for food availability. Nutrient cycling influenced species distribution, growth, and survival. Forest floors teemed with fungal networks, invisible yet vital. Life before Pangea relied on this underground web, sustaining balance and diversity. Decomposers shaped ecosystems quietly, yet their impact echoed through every corner of Earth. Ice ages and cold climates. Even before Pangea, Earth experienced ice ages and cold climates, influencing survival and evolution across continents. Glaciers carved valleys, fjords, and basins, reshaping landscapes over millennia. Ice sheets reflected sunlight, cooling surrounding regions and altering climate patterns. Animals adapted to cold with burrowing migration or huddling strategies. Plants developed frost-resistant adaptations, thriving in polar and alpine regions. Seasonal thaw created rivers, lakes, and wetlands, providing life-sustaining resources. Predators learned to hunt in snow, ice, and extreme conditions, while prey developed camouflage and evasion techniques. Ice ages influenced ocean currents, rainfall, and global climate, affecting distant ecosystems. Glacial movement redistributed minerals, shaping soil fertility downstream. Coastal regions changed with ice expansion and contraction, creating temporary habitats. Seasonal light cycles affected behavior, reproduction, and feeding. Life persisted in microclimates, geothermal zones, and sheltered areas. Insects, amphibians, and reptiles adapted or retreated to survive. Ice ages drove evolutionary innovation, resilience, and adaptability. Species learned to endure scarcity, cold, and environmental fluctuation. Tectonic shifts during ice ages created mountains, valleys, and rivers. Ecosystems evolved in response to cold stress and seasonal variability. Life endured, thrived, and adapted despite harsh climates. Ice ages were sculptors, shaping continents and pre-Pangea life. Preparing the supercontinent as continents drifted closer. Life adapted to shrinking isolation, changing climates, and shifting landscapes in preparation. For Pangea, species encountered new competitors, predators, and food sources, driving evolution. Migration increased, gene flow expanded, and ecosystems merged gradually. Land bridges and shallow seas facilitated movement, connecting previously isolated habitats. Tectonic shifts altered mountains, rivers, and oceans, creating dynamic environments. Plants colonized new soils, while animals explored new territories. Predators adjusted hunting strategies to unfamiliar prey and landscapes. Seasonal patterns and extreme weather tested adaptability and resilience. Coastal zones, wetlands, deserts, and forests merged, creating diverse ecological mosaics. Amphibians, reptiles, insects, and early mammals experimented with survival strategies. Volcanic activity and storms reshaped habitats, forcing innovation. Swamps, marshes, and rivers acted as corridors for dispersal and reproduction. Ecosystems adjusted to changing soil, water, and climate conditions. Nutrient cycling and decomposition supported expanding populations. Life experimented with behavioral, physical, and reproductive adaptations. Competition and cooperation shaped survival and evolutionary paths. Every ecosystem was interconnected, preparing for the eventual union of continents. Adaptive strategies developed, resilience strengthened, and biodiversity flourished. Earth readied itself for the emergence of Pangea and its new ecological realities. The dawn before a new era. The world before Pangea was a dynamic, ever-changing mosaic of oceans, forests, rivers, deserts, and ice, teeming with life in every corner. Amphibians, reptiles, insects, and early mammals experimented, adapted, and thrived. Forest canopies, swamps, wetlands, and coastal zones shaped behavior, survival, and evolution. Predators and prey coexisted in intricate webs, driving innovation and adaptation. Tectonic shifts, volcanoes, and glaciers sculpted continents and oceans. Rivers carved valleys, transported nutrients, and linked habitats. Extreme weather, storms, and seasonal changes tested resilience. Decomposers recycled life into soil, sustaining forests, wetlands, and coastal ecosystems. Oceans teemed with giants, small fish, and cephalopods, creating complex marine food webs. Deserts challenged life with scarcity, heat, and shifting sands. Coastal estuaries provided hubs of biodiversity and migration. Fungi and microorganisms maintained ecological balance, fueling life cycles. Ice ages influenced climate, migration, and adaptation. Forest canopies offered shelter, food, and breeding grounds. Volcanic islands created new habitats, fostering unique adaptations. Land bridges connected continents, encouraging movement and diversity. Life was abundant, interconnected, and resilient, preparing for the supercontinent era. Evolution accelerated, experimentation thrived, and Earth readied for monumental change. The pre-Pangea world was a symphony of life, shaping the planet's future in subtle yet profound ways. Lakes as life havens be for Pangea. Lakes dotted continents, providing calm. Freshwater havens for amphibians, insects, and small reptiles. Calm waters nurtured fish and invertebrates, supporting food chains and nutrient cycles. Seasonal changes influenced water levels, affecting breeding, migration, and feeding. Aquatic plants rooted in lake beds provided shelter, oxygen, and food for countless organisms. Floating vegetation offered cover for amphibians and insects, hiding them from predators. Lakeshore supported diverse plants and fungi, stabilizing soil and providing nourishment. Predators patrolled the edges, ambushing prey drawn to water. Microorganisms broke down organic material, sustaining plant growth and aquatic life. Lakes acted as natural laboratories for adaptation, encouraging experimentation in feeding and reproduction. Seasonal storms sometimes flooded lakes, expanding habitats and dispersing species. Sediment carried by rivers enriched lake beds, maintaining fertility. Amphibians laid eggs in calm pools, ensuring survival of young insects hatched in water, then emerged to colonize land. Lakes connected rivers, wetlands, and estuaries, forming ecological networks. Birds were absent, leaving insects, amphibians, and small reptiles to dominate niches. Predators adapted hunting strategies to water conditions. Seasonal temperature changes influenced activity, metabolism, and survival. Life thrived in these aquatic refuges, shaping evolution. Lakes were oases of calm, supporting diverse ecosystems. Every freshwater body was a stage of growth, survival, and adaptation. Shorelines in motion before Pangea. Shorelines were dynamic, constantly reshaped by tides, waves, and seasonal storms. Sandy beaches, rocky coasts, and tidal flats provided habitats for amphibians, insects, and small reptiles. Waves carried nutrients, seeds, and larvae, supporting food webs across land and sea. Coastal plants stabilized soil, provided shelter, and formed nurseries for young creatures. Predators patrolled tidal zones, hunting opportunistically during low and high tides. Seasonal storms reshaped coastlines, creating new habitats and connecting isolated areas. Amphibians used shorelines as hunting grounds and migration corridors. Insects thrived in intertidal zones, exploiting food and shelter. Vegetation and algae responded to saltwater intrusion, tides, and storms. Nutrient cycling maintained productivity, supporting coastal ecosystems. Swamps and wetlands often formed near shorelines, linking terrestrial and aquatic life. Volcanic islands and sandbars emerged, providing new habitats. Seasonal fluctuations influenced feeding, breeding, and movement. Predation pressure drove adaptation, camouflage, and survival strategies. Shorelines were constantly evolving, requiring resilience from life. Coastal ecosystems acted as buffers, absorbing storms and sediment flow. Freshwater inflows mingled with seawater, creating rich estuarine zones. Life adapted to the ebb and flow of tides, storms, and currents. Shorelines shaped evolution, connectivity, and diversity of species. Every wave, wind, and flood contributed to the ever-changing dance of coastal life. Mountain ranges rising before Pangea. Mountain ranges slowly emerged, shaping climates, rivers, and ecosystems across continents. Peaks created barriers for species, influencing migration, adaptation, and isolation. Valleys and slopes offered shelter, food, and breeding grounds for reptiles, amphibians, and insects. Mountain streams carved canyons, fed rivers, and nurtured fertile plains. Altitude influenced temperature, vegetation, and oxygen availability, shaping survival strategies. Snow-capped peaks reflected sunlight, affecting regional climate and weather patterns. Predators adapted hunting strategies to rocky, uneven terrain. Vegetation clung to slopes, stabilizing soil and providing shelter. Seasonal changes influenced plant growth, flowering, and reproduction. Early amphibians and reptiles ventured cautiously, seeking water and food. Insects exploited mountain microhabitats, pollinating plants and forming food chains. Soil fertility varied, enriched by erosion, glacial melt, and volcanic activity. Storms swept slopes, creating challenges for life, but also distributing seeds and nutrients. Isolated peaks encouraged unique adaptations, accelerating evolution. River systems, originating in mountains, connected ecosystems across regions. predators, and prey adjusted behaviors to altitude, temperature, and vegetation cover. Mountains influenced wind and rainfall, shaping surrounding plains and forests. Seasonal migrations followed elevation and resource availability. Life adapted to rugged terrain, temperature extremes, and scarce resources. Mountains sculpted Earth's landscape, offering challenge, shelter, and opportunity. Caves and subterranean life before Pangea. Caves and underground systems provided refuge and unique ecosystems for life. Moist, dark environments sheltered amphibians, insects, and small reptiles from predators and harsh weather. Stalactites, stalagmites, and rock formations shaped passageways and habitats. Nutrients came from surface runoff, decaying plants, and trapped organic matter. Microorganisms thrived, breaking down organic material and supporting subterranean food webs. Water percolating through rocks created pools, streams, and nutrients for life below. Seasonal flooding brought new resources, connecting caves to rivers and wetlands. Predators hunted cautiously, relying on touch, vibration, and limited light. Insects adapted to darkness, developing unique behaviors and sensory systems. Bats were absent, leaving niches for other creatures to dominate. Amphibians used caves for breeding, hunting, and shelter during dry periods. Fungi grew on decaying matter, recycling nutrients for smaller species. Mineral-rich soils supported mosses and algae where light reached. Volcanic and tectonic activity occasionally reshaped cave networks, altering habitats. Life adapted to limited space, darkness, and scarce food, demonstrating resilience. Caves acted as safe havens during storms, floods, and predation. Subterranean networks linked ecosystems, providing hidden corridors for movement. Species evolved specialized strategies for survival underground. Evolution was quietly sculpted beneath the surface, preparing life for the supercontinent. Caves were refuges, nurseries, and laboratories for adaptation and survival. Swirling ocean currents before Pangea. Ocean currents transported nutrients, species, and energy across vast distances. Warm and cold currents shaped temperature zones, influencing marine biodiversity. Predatory fish, cephalopods, and plankton thrived along current paths. Currents connected shallow seas, estuaries, and deep oceans, enabling dispersal and migration. Seasonal storms interacted with currents, altering food availability and habitat conditions. Coastal zones benefited from nutrient deposition, supporting amphibians, insects, and early reptiles. Waves carried seeds, larvae, and microorganisms to distant shores. Predators adapted hunting strategies to shifting currents, exploiting prey. Movements, currents influenced oxygen levels, water chemistry, and temperature stability. Coral-like structures and algae responded to nutrient flow, creating dense habitats. Ocean giants followed currents for feeding, breeding, and migration. Currents bridged continents, affecting gene flow and species distribution. Seasonal shifts altered current strength, direction, and impact. Microorganisms played key roles in nutrient cycling along currents. Currents sculpted coastlines, depositing sediments and reshaping habitats. Life adapted to moving waters, fluctuating temperatures, and shifting nutrients. Ocean currents were invisible highways connecting life across oceans. Predation, competition, and reproduction were shaped by flow and movement. Currents maintained ecosystem health and stability, sustaining life before Pangea. Oceanic motion prepared species for new supercontinent challenges. Predator-prey dynamics before Pangea. Predator-prey relationships dictated survival, behavior, and evolution. Large fish hunted smaller marine creatures, while cephalopods used stealth and speed to capture prey. Amphibians patrolled swamps and rivers, feeding on insects, crustaceans, and smaller amphibians. Reptiles stalked forests, plains, and coastal zones, ambushing prey with strategy and patience. Insects dominated aerial and terrestrial niches, hunting or scavenging food. Predation pressure encouraged camouflage, speed, defensive adaptations, and burrowing. Seasonal changes affected prey availability, hunting strategies, and reproductive timing. Vegetation, forests, and wetlands provided shelter, concealment, and ambush opportunities. Predators learned to track movement, vibration, and environmental cues to locate prey. Prey species evolved escape strategies, warning signals, and protective coloration. Competition among predators intensified survival pressure. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands influenced predator-prey interactions by providing water and food. Coastal zones and shallow seas were hunting grounds for amphibians, reptiles, and fish. Seasonal storms and floods temporarily reshaped habitats, altering predation patterns. Evolution was accelerated by constant interaction, challenge, and adaptation. Predator-prey dynamics maintained ecological balance, shaping population size and diversity. Life adapted to constant threat while exploiting opportunity. Interactions were complex, influencing evolution, behavior, and survival strategies. Every ecosystem was intertwined, dependent on predator-prey relationships. Pre-Pangea life thrived under the pressure and guidance of predation. Evolving reptiles before Pangea. Reptiles diversified rapidly, colonizing land, water, and coastal zones. Limbs allowed movement on uneven terrain, while scales protected against predators, heat, and dehydration. Reptiles hunted insects, amphibians, and smaller reptiles, becoming dominant predators in some ecosystems. Seasonal patterns dictated breeding, feeding, and migration. Burrowing, climbing, and swimming enabled exploration of diverse habitats. Predators competed for territory, mates, and food, driving specialization and adaptation. Rivers, swamps, and wetlands provided essential water sources for survival and reproduction. Coastal zones offered abundant resources, while forests and deserts demanded flexibility. Skin secretions and coloration provided camouflage, protection, and signaling. Reptiles developed sensory adaptations, detecting movement, vibration, and chemical cues. Predation shaped behavior, size, and hunting strategies. Reptiles influenced prey populations, plant growth, and insect distribution. Environmental challenges like storms, floods, and droughts drove resilience. Migration and dispersal across temporary land bridges increased genetic diversity. Early mammals and amphibians coexisted, forming complex food webs. Volcanic activity and tectonic shifts created new habitats for exploration. Life adapted to fluctuating conditions, predation, and competition. Reptiles were versatile, dominant, and innovative, shaping pre-Pangea ecosystems. Evolutionary experimentation prepared them for the supercontinent era. The role of microorganisms. Microorganisms before Pangea were invisible architects, sustaining life through nutrient cycling, decomposition, and symbiotic relationships. Bacteria and algae thrived in soil, water, and decaying matter, recycling essential elements. Fungi partnered with plants, aiding growth, nutrient absorption, and resilience. Aquatic microorganisms formed the base of marine food webs, feeding fish, crustaceans, and amphibians. Soil microbes enriched ecosystems, supporting forests, wetlands, and coastal vegetation. Microorganisms adapted to extreme conditions, including floods, droughts, and volcanic ash. Decomposition returned nutrients to the environment, sustaining growth and survival. Microbial mats stabilized sediments in rivers, lakes, and shallow seas. Symbiotic interactions enhanced plant health, resilience, and reproductive success. Seasonal changes influenced microbial activity, nutrient cycling, and productivity. Predators indirectly depended on microorganisms for sustaining prey populations. Coastal, forest, and wetland ecosystems relied on microbial balance for stability. Microorganisms shaped oxygen levels, carbon cycling, and climate regulation. Fungi and bacteria broke down complex organic matter into usable nutrients. Life evolved alongside microorganisms, exploiting their presence for survival. Soil and aquatic health were maintained by these unseen allies. Microbes influenced adaptation, population dynamics, and species diversity. Pre-Pangea ecosystems were interdependent, with microorganisms at the core. Life thrived through collaboration with these invisible partners. Microorganisms quietly guided evolution and ecosystem function across continents. The threshold of a supercontinent's scattered continents slowly converged. Life faced new opportunities, challenges, and ecological pressures, preparing for Pangea. Tectonic movement reshaped oceans, rivers, forests, and mountains, influencing habitats. Land bridges enabled migration, gene flow, and species interaction. Climate shifted with continental drift, driving adaptation and survival strategies. Predators and prey confronted new competition, reshaping behavior, hunting, and defense. Coastal zones, wetlands, deserts, and forests merged, creating complex ecosystems. Volcanic activity, storms, and glaciers altered landscapes, forcing flexibility and innovation. Reptiles, amphibians, insects, and early mammals explored, adapted, and colonized emerging habitats. Plants spread across newly connected lands, stabilizing soil and supporting ecosystems. Seasonal cycles dictated reproduction, feeding, and migration, linking species to environmental rhythms. Microorganisms and decomposers maintained nutrient cycling, ensuring ecological balance. Life experimented with behavioral, physical, and reproductive strategies. Rivers carved new valleys, transporting nutrients and connecting ecosystems. Coastal estuaries flourished as mixing zones of freshwater and marine life. Predation and competition drove evolutionary innovation, adaptation, and specialization. Habitat complexity increased with convergence, fostering diversity. Migration expanded population ranges, creating new opportunities for interaction. Environmental change accelerated evolution, resilience, and experimentation. Life thrived despite instability, preparing for Pangea's unification. The world stood on the threshold of a new era, ready for monumental geological and ecological transformation. Rippling rivers and waterways before Pangea. Rivers carved paths across continents, shaping landscapes, nourishing ecosystems, and providing life-sustaining water. Seasonal rains and glacial melts influenced river flow, creating dynamic channels, floodplains, and deltas. Fish, amphibians, and insects thrived in freshwater habitats, forming intricate food webs. Rivers linked lakes, wetlands, and estuaries, allowing species migration and gene flow. Banks were lined with plants whose roots stabilized soil and prevented erosion. Flooding redistributed nutrients, fostering fertile plains for forests and swamps. Predators stalked riverbanks, hunting amphibians, reptiles, and smaller fish. Currents transported seeds, spores, and microorganisms, promoting dispersal across distant habitats. Aquatic plants provided shelter and oxygen, supporting aquatic life. Seasonal storms altered water levels, exposing new feeding grounds or isolating pools. Sediment deposition shaped river valleys, creating new habitats over time. Early reptiles explored riverbanks, hunting and nesting near water. Insects colonized riparian zones, pollinating plants and serving as prey. Decomposition maintained soil fertility, supporting forests and wetlands. Rivers acted as natural corridors, connecting ecosystems and influencing behavior. Predators adapted to moving waters, ambushing prey efficiently. Amphibians relied on rivers for reproduction, migration, and survival. Floodplains nurtured biodiversity, hosting dense populations of life. Life thrived in flowing waters, evolving resilience, adaptability, and specialization. Rivers were lifelines, sculpting continents and sustaining pre-Pangea life. The rise of seed plants before Pangea. Seed plants began to diversify, colonizing forests, plains, and wetlands, transforming terrestrial ecosystems. Gymnosperms and primitive trees developed seeds to survive harsh conditions, dispersing offspring more efficiently. Roots anchored plants, stabilized soil, and absorbed water and nutrients. Leaves adapted to capture sunlight, prevent water loss, and resist herbivory. Pollen spread via wind, facilitating reproduction across landscapes. Seed plants provided shelter, food, and oxygen for animals, insects, and amphibians. Forest canopies expanded, creating vertical habitats with microclimates beneath. Decomposition and nutrient cycling maintained soil fertility, supporting plant growth. Seasonal variations influenced flowering, seeding, and dispersal cycles. Predators and herbivores interacted with plants, driving adaptations in defense and growth. Seeds allowed colonization of harsh or isolated environments, increasing biodiversity. Swamps and wetlands offered rich, nutrient-laden soil for young. Forests, coastal zones benefited from plant stabilization, reducing erosion. Plants influenced riverbanks, lakeshores, and estuaries, shaping ecosystems. Microorganisms and fungi partnered with roots, enhancing nutrient uptake. Wind, water, and animals dispersed seeds, connecting habitats. Forest floors were rich with decaying matter, supporting insects, amphibians, and reptiles. Adaptation, resilience, and competition shaped plant diversity. Seed plants transformed Earth's landscapes, preparing life for Pangea. Evolution accelerated as plants diversified, influencing animal evolution and ecological balance. Shallow marine reefs before Pangea. Shallow marine reefs flourished along coastlines, providing shelter, food, and breeding grounds for countless species. Coral-like structures, algae, and primitive invertebrates formed complex three-dimensional habitats. Small fish, crustaceans, and mollusks thrived among coral branches, avoiding predators and feeding on plankton. Predatory fish and cephalopods patrolled reefs, hunting opportunistically with speed and precision. Seasonal storms reshaped reef structures, creating new opportunities and challenges. Currents brought nutrients, dispersing larvae, spores, and microorganisms. Reef edges provided transitional zones between open ocean and coastal waters, facilitating species interaction. Amphibians and reptiles occasionally foraged along shallow reefs during low tides. Microorganisms maintained nutrient cycling, decomposing organic material and sustaining growth. Reefs encouraged specialization, camouflage, and symbiosis among species. Nutrient flow from rivers enriched reef productivity, supporting abundant life. Predators adapted hunting strategies to reef complexity and prey behavior. Insects thrived in adjacent coastal zones, exploiting plant and algae resources. Competition shaped territoriality, feeding habits, and reproductive strategies. Flooding, volcanic ash, and tectonic shifts occasionally disrupted reef ecosystems. Life adapted to constantly changing environments, evolving resilience and diversity. Reefs were nurseries for young fish and invertebrates, sustaining future populations. Predation, cooperation, and competition intertwined within reef ecosystems. Shallow marine reefs were vibrant, dynamic, and essential to pre-Pangea biodiversity. Early mammal ancestors before Pangea. Early mammal ancestors were small, nocturnal, and largely inconspicuous, surviving alongside dominant reptiles and amphibians. Burrowing habits provided protection from predators and extreme weather. They fed on insects, seeds, and small invertebrates, exploiting niches avoided by larger species. Rapid reproduction and adaptability allowed them to colonize diverse habitats, from forests to wetlands. Nighttime activity reduced predation pressure, while sensory adaptation enhanced survival. Competition with reptiles and amphibians influenced feeding behavior and movement. Seasonal changes shaped reproductive cycles and foraging strategies. Fur or skin adaptations helped regulate temperature and conserve moisture. Early mammals utilized underground tunnels, fallen logs, and dense vegetation for shelter. Small size allowed agility, speed, and escape from predators. Interaction with insects, amphibians, and plants facilitated ecological balance. Volcanic and storm disturbances tested resilience and migration capabilities. Population dispersal occurred through rivers, wetlands, and connecting landmasses. Predation shaped vigilance, camouflage, and social behavior. Evolutionary experimentation included feeding, movement, and reproductive strategies. Life was dynamic, cautious, and opportunistic, navigating a world dominated by larger species. Microhabitats offered safety and sustenance, promoting survival. Early mammals laid the foundation for future diversity and adaptation. Their presence marked the beginning of mammalian evolution before Pangea. Interconnected wetlands before Pangea. Wetlands formed vast, interconnected networks, linking rivers, lakes, and coastal estuaries. Swamps, marshes, and bogs supported amphibians, insects, and small reptiles in dense, productive habitats. Seasonal flooding expanded wetlands, enabling species migration and genetic exchange. Plant roots stabilized soil, while decomposers recycled nutrients, sustaining life. Predators patrolled shallow waters and muddy banks, hunting opportunistically. Microorganisms and fungi maintained ecological balance, breaking down organic material. Wetlands moderated local climate, influencing temperature, humidity, and rainfall patterns. Vegetation provided shelter, breeding grounds, and foraging opportunities. Islands within wetlands offered refuge from predators and extreme weather. Amphibians relied on wetlands for reproduction, feeding, and movement. Insects thrived in these habitats, forming essential links in food webs. Predation, competition, and cooperation shaped survival strategies. Seasonal storms redistributed nutrients, seeds, and organisms across wetlands. Water chemistry fluctuated, encouraging adaptation and resilience. Coastal wetlands buffered tides and waves, protecting inland ecosystems. Wetlands connected terrestrial and aquatic habitats, fostering biodiversity. Life adapted to constantly changing water levels, nutrients, and predator pressure. Wetlands were cradles of diversity, sustaining ecosystems before Pangea. They formed ecological highways, linking species across continents. Coastal tidal flats before Pangea. Tidal flats along coastlines provided critical habitats for amphibians, insects, and small reptiles. Shallow waters and exposed mudflats offered abundant food and shelter. Predators waited patiently, ambushing creatures during low tides. Seasonal tides and storms reshaped flatlands, redistributing nutrients and sediment. Algae, seaweed, and primitive plants stabilized soil and provided cover. Coastal invertebrates burrowed, feeding on detritus and supporting food webs. Amphibians ventured cautiously, hunting insects and small prey along tidal edges. Microorganisms decomposed organic material, recycling nutrients for plants and aquatic life. Tidal flats acted as nurseries for young species, fostering population growth. Seasonal variation influenced feeding, breeding, and migration patterns. Coastal currents transported larvae, spores, and seeds to distant regions. Predation and competition shaped behavior, morphology, and strategies. Vegetation adapted to salt, waves, and wind, providing resilience. Flooding connected tidal flats to wetlands, estuaries, and rivers. Insects dominated aerial niches, exploiting tidal zones for food. Amphibians relied on moist conditions to survive and reproduce. Nutrient-rich sediments promoted diverse ecosystems. Life adapted to fluctuating water, salinity, and predator presence. Tidal flats were productive, dynamic, and essential for pre-Pangea biodiversity. They connected ecosystems and prepared species for the merging continents. The spread of early insects before Pangea. Insects were diversifying, exploiting forests, wetlands, and coastal habitats across scattered continents. Wings, segmented bodies, and specialized mouthparts allowed adaptation to various niches. Herbivorous species fed on primitive plants, while predators hunted smaller insects and arthropods. Aquatic larvae colonized rivers, lakes, and wetlands, later emerging to colonize land. Seasonal changes influenced activity, reproduction, and dispersal. Predation, pressure, encouraged speed, camouflage, and defensive mechanisms. Insects contributed to pollination, nutrient cycling, and decomposition. Burrowing and shelter-seeking behaviors provided protection from predators and storms. Forest canopies and wetlands offered food and refuge, shaping behavior and adaptation. Competition drove niche specialization and diversification. Seasonal flooding enabled dispersal to new habitats and continents. Insects linked terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, supporting amphibians, reptiles, and early mammals. Morphological variation encouraged survival in diverse climates and terrains. Predators relied on insects as primary food sources. Insects thrived in microhabitats, from forest floors to leaf surfaces. Interaction with plants influenced evolution, seed dispersal, and pollination. Life adapted to predators, weather, and competition. Insects became foundational components of pre-Pangea ecosystems. Their success paved the way for complex food webs and ecological stability. Glacial retreats and refugibear Pangea glaciers advanced and retreated across polar and alpine regions, shaping landscapes and influencing life. Retreating ice exposed soil, rivers, and valleys, creating new habitats for colonization. Cold-adapted species thrived in glacial zones, while others migrated to refugia for survival. Seasonal meltwater nourished rivers, lakes, and wetlands, sustaining aquatic life. Vegetation slowly recolonized barren land, providing shelter and food for insects, amphibians, and reptiles. Predators adjusted hunting and migration strategies to seasonal changes. Microorganisms and fungi enriched soil, facilitating plant growth. Ice advances periodically destroyed habitats, testing resilience and adaptability. Isolation in refugia encouraged unique adaptations and accelerated evolution. Volcanic activity sometimes intersected with glacial zones, reshaping ecosystems. Glacial valleys served as corridors, connecting habitats during melt periods. Seasonal storms, floods, and temperature shifts challenged survival. Reptiles, amphibians, and early mammals exploited emerging niches. Nutrient cycling maintained ecosystem productivity during colonization. Snowmelt influenced river courses, estuaries, and wetlands, linking ecosystems. Predation and competition shaped population distribution and behavior. Life adapted to extremes, evolving strategies for endurance, mobility, and resourcefulness. Glacial retreats created opportunities for expansion, dispersal, and ecological innovation. Refugia served as lifeboats for species, preserving diversity. The dynamic interplay of ice and life shaped pre-Pangea evolution, preparing for continental collision as tectonic plates shifted. Continents drifted closer, preparing Earth for the monumental formation of Pangea. Mountains, rivers, and seas were reshaped, influencing migration, adaptation, and survival. Species encountered new competitors, predators, and opportunities as isolation decreased. Land bridges emerged temporarily, allowing movement and gene flow across continents. Climate patterns shifted with changing geography, impacting feeding, breeding, and survival strategies. Coastal zones, wetlands, forests, and deserts merged gradually, creating complex ecosystems. Volcanic activity and storms altered landscapes, forcing adaptation and resilience. Reptiles, amphibians, insects, and early mammals explored new habitats, colonizing and exploiting available niches. Plants expanded across lands, stabilizing soil and supporting ecosystems. Seasonal cycles, extreme weather, and flooding shaped behavior, reproduction, and dispersal. Predator-prey dynamics intensified as species interacted in new ways. Microorganisms, fungi, and decomposers maintained nutrient cycling and ecosystem health. Rivers, lakes, and estuaries connected previously. Isolated habitats, competition, and cooperation drove evolutionary experimentation and innovation. Habitats increased in complexity, encouraging specialization and diversity. Migration expanded population ranges, fostering genetic variation. Environmental challenges accelerated adaptation, survival, and resilience. Life thrived despite instability, preparing for Pangea's emergence. The stage was set for a new era of supercontinent evolution, connecting life like never before. Volcanic islands and life colonization before Pangea. Volcanic islands emerged from the oceans, creating new habitats for plants, insects, amphibians, and small reptiles. Lava flows shaped terrain, while ash enriched nearby soils, enabling plant colonization. Coastal tidal zones and rocky shores provided shelter for aquatic life and nesting sites for amphibians. Insects flew between islands, pollinating plants and dispersing seeds. Predators explored volcanic slopes in search of prey, adapting to harsh terrain. Microorganisms and fungi colonized volcanic soil, recycling nutrients and supporting plant growth. Seasonal storms brought rainfall, replenishing water sources and influencing vegetation. Amphibians and reptiles adapted to limited resources, using burrows, crevices, and vegetation for survival. Volcanic activity reshaped ecosystems, unpredictably driving resilience and adaptation. Islands acted as ecological laboratories, encouraging rapid evolution. Life dispersed from islands to coastal zones and wetlands, connecting habitats. Plant roots stabilized loose soil, reducing erosion and supporting insects and small animals. Ocean currents carried larvae, seeds, and microorganisms to neighboring islands. Flooding and tides enriched nutrient availability, sustaining diverse communities. Predation pressure encouraged stealth, agility, and behavioral adaptation. Islands provided isolated habitats for experimentation, accelerating evolution. Coastal pools and lagoons nurtured young species, ensuring survival. Life exploited every niche, thriving despite challenges. Volcanic islands were cradles of innovation and resilience before Pangea. Bridges between continents before Pangea. Temporary land bridges connected continents, allowing species migration, gene flow, and ecological interaction. Amphibians, reptiles, and insects ventured across these pathways, expanding territories and exploring new habitats. Rivers, wetlands, and coastal zones facilitated movement and dispersal. Predators followed prey across bridges, testing survival strategies and adaptability. Plants spread their seeds, stabilizing soil and providing shelter along the route. Seasonal changes influenced migration, timing, feeding patterns, and reproductive cycles. Microorganisms and fungi accompanied species, maintaining soil health and ecosystem balance. Floods, storms, and tidal events sometimes disrupted passageways, creating challenges and opportunities. Predation and competition intensified as previously isolated species met. Behavioral, morphological, and reproductive adaptations emerged rapidly. Land bridges linked forested, desert, and coastal habitats, increasing ecological complexity, and wetlands offered safe refuges along migration corridors. Seasonal variation influenced river levels, vegetation growth, and predator-prey dynamics. Life adapted to continuous environmental change, developing resilience and flexibility. Islands and shallow seas acted as stepping stones, easing dispersal between continents. Predation drove stealth, speed, and survival strategies across new terrain. Gene flow enhanced diversity, increasing population stability and adaptability. Land bridges played a crucial role in preparing ecosystems for Pangea's convergence. Species exploration and interaction flourished, shaping evolutionary paths. Bridges between continents were vital arteries of life, enabling expansion and connectivity. Primitive coastal mangroves before Pangea. Primitive mangrove-like plants grew along coasts, stabilizing soil, providing shelter, and nurturing biodiversity. Roots extended into shallow waters, preventing erosion and creating habitats for amphibians and insects. Seasonal tides and storms redistributed sediment, influencing root structure and plant growth. Coastal vegetation offered protection from predators, foraging grounds, and breeding sites. Microorganisms and fungi thrived in nutrient-rich soils, supporting plants and nearby ecosystems. Reptiles patrolled shores, hunting prey hidden among roots and mud. Insects thrived in aerial and terrestrial niches, pollinating plants and serving as prey. Seasonal floods expanded habitats, connecting mangroves to wetlands, rivers, and estuaries. Nutrient cycling maintained ecosystem productivity, sustaining plants, amphibians, and reptiles. Predation shaped behavior, camouflage, and survival strategies. Mangroves stabilized coastlines, buffering waves and tides while enriching water. Chemistry. Sediment deposition provided fertile ground for colonization by new plants. Roots formed complex networks, creating microhabitats for diverse life. Amphibians and reptiles used mangroves for shelter and hunting. Coastal insects contributed to ecosystem balance, pollination, and nutrient transfer. Plant-animal interactions maintained ecological networks and biodiversity. Mangrove zones encouraged adaptation to fluctuating water, salinity, and predation. Life thrived within these transitional zones, forming critical pre-Pangea ecosystems. Mangroves exemplified resilience, connectivity, and ecological innovation before continental collision. Ice sheets and glacial landscapes before Pangea. Ice sheets and glaciers sculpted polar and alpine landscapes, influencing rivers, valleys, and ecosystems. Glacial advance reshaped mountains, carving valleys, and redistributing sediments. Retreating ice exposed fertile soil, lakes, and rivers for colonization. Cold-adapted species survived in glacial zones, while others migrated to warmer refugia. Seasonal meltwater sustained aquatic life, feeding rivers, wetlands, and estuaries. Vegetation recolonized newly exposed land, providing shelter, food, and habitat complexity. Predators adapted hunting strategies to icy terrain and seasonal changes. Microorganisms and fungi enriched soil, supporting plant growth. Snowmelt connected isolated habitats, facilitating migration and dispersal. Seasonal storms and floods tested resilience and adaptability of life. Amphibians, reptiles, and early mammals exploited emerging niches, colonizing new environments. Nutrient cycling maintained ecosystem productivity during recodify. Glacial refugia encouraged unique adaptations and accelerated evolution. Ice sheets influenced climate, wind, and precipitation patterns globally. Life adapted to extremes, developing strategies for survival, mobility, and reproduction. Predation, competition, and cooperation shaped population dynamics. Volcanic activity intersected with glaciers, altering habitats and creating fertile soils. Microhabitats under ice and in valleys nurtured diverse species. Glacial landscapes were dynamic arenas of adaptation, survival, and evolution. Ice sculpted continents, preparing life for Pangea's merging landmasses.